Each region of the world has its own unique monster that terrifies their respective people. The Great Lakes region and South Central Canada is no exception. In that area, there lies a monster that feeds on human flesh and stalks human like typical prey. I'm speaking of the Wendigo, a cannibalistic monster the size of a tree with the strength to tear apart a person like a person tears apart a rotisserie chicken. Algonquian legends state that it's a giant with a heart of ice. Sometimes it is thought to be entirely made of ice. Its body is skeletal and deformed with missing lips and toes. Algonquian, I can't pronounce it guys, I'm sorry. Legends further state that when a person gives into hunger and eats human flesh that they begin to morph into a Wendigo. Other Algonquian legends also state that a person can become a Wendigo when they are greedy and a glutton, and that they may also be possessed by the Wendigo spirit when they act like that. A Wendigo is also said to have glowing eyes, long yellow fangs, terrible claws, and long tongues. They also have yellow skin and are rotten, similar to how a zombie looks but larger and stronger. A person who begins to show signs of a Wendigo will start to want to eat their loved ones and people near them. They'll get a craving to eat their loved one's flesh. The Wendigo also has the power to sound like your loved ones, and if you ever hear someone you know yelling for help in the forest, tread lightly. I'm going to go over a few stories. Well, it's really just one story that I find true enough, so brace yourselves as we go over the Wendigo. I will be reading this story straight from Reddit. I copied and pasted into my notes, so I will post a link to that Reddit post so you can read it yourself. If you want to follow along, you can do that or just listen to my voice. I also talk like this because it helps with the popping of my mic. For whatever reason, my mic makes popping sounds and I don't know how to figure it out yet. So excuse that, and I'm going to start the story. I honestly don't know where to start, but if I'm ready to be posting this story of mine, but hopefully it'll help. I know you won't believe me, and honestly, I won't even blame you guys. It still doesn't make sense in my own head, and I've heard stories about unknown creatures in woods, but never that I thought I'd encounter one myself, you know? I posted another story about some creepy old people that I had encountered in the woods, but that's nothing. This makes a good horror story for people, but it eats at me every day. But here we go. I love to go hiking. I go with my 3-year-old German Shepherd, and I let her unleash since we like to go to secluded spots. Now, I have been hiking all over the Utah mountains, and I wanted a new hike, but it wasn't too far away from me. I have an app that tells me about hikes near me. It's a hard hike. If it's a hard hike, reviews, and if it's a dog friendly. Now, I was scrolling through All Trail looking for possibly something new, but I wasn't too hopeful. But to my delight, there was something new. I don't know why I remember the name of it, but I do remember it was at the bottom of the list, and it had one review saying, good. It was probably the Wendigo. I thought that was kind of strange, mostly because people like to review hikes and try to tell the city where they can do to improve the hike, make it more safe, but I figured it wasn't a popular hike. So the next day, Kiari, his dog, and I packed up our stuff and we went up towards the hike. I always carry a first aid kit, extra food, a knife, and just emergency stuff in case I get lost. It's important to note that Kiari eats a raw diet, meaning she eats raw meat, not cooked, and since we were going to go early in the morning, I thought I could bring some with us. I put it in her blue backpack that I make her wear, and I decided when it was getting warmer that we would stop and eat. Where I live, there's a long drive through the canyon and many roads going towards the hike that you like to go on. This was a little further than I'd like to, but I don't care. It was new, and I was excited. So was Kiari. She cries in the car until we get there. Now, I'm following the directions on my phone and saw that it had led me towards a thin road that was hidden. No wonder I haven't heard of this place. It was hidden and far up the mountain. The road only fit one car, so the whole time I was anxious that another car would come down and how I would handle that, but there never was. I never saw another car, and when I got to the parking lot, if you could call it that, I noticed that there was only a space for like 3 cars, all in a tight space. It was small, so I decided to park on the front, facing towards the road. I thought that it was private property. I checked the app, but it didn't say anything about private property. I shrugged it off. Put Kiari out, and I prepared us, and I saw the trail. Now, even though I knew there wasn't anybody parked there, I kept Kiari on a leash. I knew if there was any bikers along the trail, After 30 minutes or so, I didn't see anybody. I decided to let her off the leash. It was a steep hike for the first half, but it was beautiful. We were deep in the woods and I felt at peace. I used to wear headphones when I hiked, and I don't anymore, so I was enjoying the natural sounds of the forest. It was still early in the morning, so I wore a light jacket and decided that when it got warmer, I'd give Kiari her breakfast. Now, before you start to hate, I know bringing raw meat was absolutely stupid and ignorant of me. I've never seen a bear or wolf or anything, so I got cocky and I thought it was okay. I learned my lesson. My bad. So no need to tell me I was dumb. But honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you commented that. From here is where we begin the bad part of my story. The trail finally stopped being steep and sort of an easy hike from here. When you got to the top, you could see through the trees a beautiful open meadow. On the other side of it, you could hear a river and waterfall. The trail went around the meadow. The meadow was absolutely beautiful with mountains in the background. The sound of the water. This hike was almost the most beautiful one I've ever been to. When Kiari and I were sort of in the middle of the meadow, she stopped right in front of me and looked towards the meadow. Kiari always walked ahead of me, and when I stopped, I stopped. When she stopped, I stopped. And since I trusted her judgment, I decided to stop. But before I could look, the smell hit me first. You know, the typical rotting smell, but oh my god, words cannot explain how bad it stank. It burned my nose and it started to make me tear up. I put my shirt over my nose. Feeling nauseous, I looked over to where Kiari was looking. In the middle of the meadow, there was a deer. Now, I've only seen does, but never a male deer person, and it's called a buck. But his antlers were gone. Oh, I'm sorry, but his antlers were huge. Have you ever seen Princess Mononoke? Well, when you see the deer spirit walking across the water, that's how big his antlers were, almost like that. The beauty of the deer was amazing, but not enough to take away the disgusting smell that was making me sick. The deer looked towards the mountains and away from me. I thought Mary Kiari's food was going bad, and I checked that, but it seemed fine. When I looked up again, the deer was looking towards our direction. I noticed that Kiari hackles went up way after that. She started to cry nervously. Now, I've heard of Wendigos and skinwalkers. I am Native American. It is common for these creatures to be in our childhood stories. Now, after listening to scary stories on YouTube, now that Kiari did that, I got a bad feeling in my stomach despite the sickness. It was a Wendigo, and I knew that. Now, I didn't know what to do. Who would? These creatures were only a part of my stories to make me go to bed, not instructions on what to do. Plus, my grandma was the one with the stories, and she passed away. She was the one with the experience, not my mom or anyone else. I glanced at Kiari again when she cried, looked back towards the creature. It started to stand on its hind legs, and holy hell, it was freaking tall, and it faced my direction. It started to walk towards me, and I was going to run until I heard in my head, I am the one of this land. Suddenly, it started to run towards me, full speed. I screamed. I called Kiari, and we started to run. Kiari was following behind me, and I started to cry as I was running, since I could hear it catching up on me. It was loud. It was destroying everything that it came in contact with to get to me. The adrenaline running through me was making me focus on running. I didn't know what to go. I just ran. The trail suddenly seemed smaller, and brushes with thorns started to appear, but I didn't feel them as I caught my arms. As I heard it got closer, it suddenly went to my left as I ran straight. I somehow had the balls to look back to see where it was. And it was gone, but also was Kiari. Kiari, I yelled. Right as I called out for her, the trail ended with a foot drop onto a patch of rocks. I hit my head. I was bleeding a lot. But before I could feel it that much, I just got up. I looked towards the forest when I suddenly heard a loud cry from my right. It was Kiari. Kiari! I cried out. I stood up, crying, and lost out what to do. I looked back at the river leading up to the waterfall I heard. Suddenly, a heavy weight ran into me, and we both fell back. I hit my head again on the back, and I looked up, and thank God it was Kiari. Kiari had blood all over her, and it was pouring from her neck. Kiari, I cried out. She was whimpering, breathing heavy. She still had her backpack on with some cuts in it. Before I had a chance to help her, a scream came from the forest. I looked back at the waterfall, and somehow I had the strength to pick up my 85-pound dog and carry her. I don't know what I was planning to go, but I was just running towards the waterfall as if it was a safe place. I was almost there when I heard the creature land on the rocks, and I did it. And I did early. I tripped at that. I looked back to see it was looking at me. Its eyes were black, or I think so. It could be that there wasn't anything there. I don't know. I was scared. I took off towards Kiari's backpack, and I threw it towards the monster, hoping that it would take the meat and just leave us alone. I was scooting back towards the waterfall, crying as I did so, holding and dragging Kiari with my left arm. I found that being so close to the creature literally made me weak to my knees. It walked over to me, taking huge steps. It looked no different than before. Before it looked like a deer. Now when it crawled over to me, it looked like a monster. I don't know how to else describe this awful demon. I don't. I'm sorry. But I felt water hit my head hard as I reached towards the waterfall. I kept going until I was up against the wall. There's barely enough space where the water wasn't hitting Kiari in my face. Kiari felt limp at this point. She felt dead. I could somewhat see the creature through the water, but still saw it coming towards me. It stood on its hind legs, and when it was close enough, it was watching me. The smell was disgusting. I couldn't help but throw up in my mouth. It reached its arms out to grab me, and I screamed so loud, I actually lost my voice. After I let out a scream, another scream came from deep in the forest. The creature snapped its head, almost completely backwards, looking towards the scream. The scream sounded like the one that this one had let out earlier. I was still holding on to Kiari, crying and screaming since its arm was close. I looked back to me, pulling its arm away, and again it said in my mind, I am the one of this land. With that, it took steps back watching me and went back down the river bank. It crawled on all fours, stopping next to Kiari's backpack. It ripped it apart and pulled out the meat, eating it with the plastic bag that was in it. It suddenly screamed, and it ran towards the direction of the scream from earlier. When I thought I was gone, I stood up, shaking, and I carried Kiari towards the trail again. When I was running, I came across the backpack that I left earlier and stopped. It was ripped apart, so I took off my jacket and I wrapped it around Kiari's neck, where she was bleeding a lot. After that, I barely remember. All I remember is that carrying Kiari and driving down, screaming the whole way towards that emergency vet. They asked us what happened, and I told them that it was a bear. They called the ambulance since I had blood all over me, and they couldn't tell if it was mine or Kiari's. Kiari made it through surgery, and had to make they had to give her some stitches along with a pad. It didn't really heal, and there was a huge bump that grew on there where the cut was. It had been infected and eventually got better. She had a bite mark on the top of her left eye that had healed much better. They pulled out a 4-inch tooth. Seems a little too big. I don't have it because I couldn't even look at it when they declared it was from a bear, even though they said it looked weird. When I was waiting for Kiari, I went up to the trail on the app and it was gone. I don't know what, but how it is. I don't remember what it is either. It's all a blur. I have some pictures. I'll have some pictures of Kiari. The one with my niece is a hike where my mom took her with my niece. This guy doesn't know how to write. It had been weeks after, and my mom thought to try and help her through it. Kiari looked nervous in the picture, but you can tell that the huge bump on her left side of her neck. There's also a picture with Kiari and her bandages around her neck. Also, the one that is the most recent on her back, it's black. The stitches came back. The last picture is of the top of her head, also black, but it's not healed. I'll find some way to post them. I haven't been hiking since, and I refuse to let Kiari go. That this one time, my mom took her while I was at work and regretted it because she said Kiari was crying and was so scared that they just had to go home. My mom knows, and I scream at night from nightmares for a week or two. My mom put white candles in my room to get rid of the bad spirits attached to my negativity. So yeah, here's my story. I've heard stories where people saw Wendigo and they didn't get harmed, and God, I wish I went through that. I hate hiking. My therapist thinks I have some type of PTSD, but only knows of it as a bear. I'm getting through it. Kiari is too. Hopefully one day I can go back, but I don't really see that for a while. If you're ever going up to the mountains, please prepare. Mother Nature is not only unpredictable, but has things in there that just don't make sense. So please, be safe. And I say that with serious sincerity. If there's any other subreddits I can post this, then I would love to know so I can share my story and maybe help others out there. Thanks for reading. Oh, wow. That's a good story. There's a couple of things that I wanted to criticize about it. It's in Utah, so that's kind of, I don't know, north central of the states. I had to look at my map, but it's a little south of where the Wendigo is supposed to live. Now, we know that mountain lions travel hundreds of miles. There is a lot of desert and a lot of forest, trees. These things could get could definitely travel a distance, especially if it's 15 feet tall or so and it's able to glide on the ground. I mean, we don't know how these things cover space, and for sure I think that there are things out there that we will never understand how they work, and the reason why we can't take pictures of it. It's something extra dimensional. I don't think it's just simple as a creature that's living on this planet. It scares me knowing that there's things out there that we just can't combat. There's stories of Wendigos and skinwalkers being shot in the face by people and nothing happens. If you're familiar with the Skinwalker story, the Skinwalker Ranch story, they have stories of them shooting these giant wolves that are like from some other area, from another dimension, and they like shoot them and nothing happens to them. It's just super creepy. So that's going to be today's Wendigo story. I'm going to be posting some Georgia stories. I think I'm going to do a Hocus Pocus video on one, and then the sequel in book form. So I'm going to do a 2-part video series pretty soon. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it for Halloween, but I got to freaking read the book, and I'm like chapter 1. So thank you so much for being a listener. I know I was gone for 2 weeks. I went to Georgia. I was on vacation, so I couldn't really make videos while I traveled, and then I got super sick. All right. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Do you guys think I should talk this slow, or should I just use my regular voice? It's just using this voice is so much easier to, it doesn't distort, and I don't know how to process my audio equipment, or my audio files yet. So I'm still learning. All right. Love you guys. Thank you. Bye. See ya. Peace.